Congressman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Marsha, it is good to have you back here on America's Forum.
It is so good to talk with you. Always is.
Well, Marsha, you voted with the Republican majority and 7 Democrats to establish this select committee on Benghazi, and you issued a statement saying the Obama administration has been less than cooperative in providing the facts. You say the administration may have even withheld information, but as you might expect, as predictable as the sun rising in the east, the New York Times has an editorial out today with the headline, "Center Ring at the Republican Circus." This editorial reads in part, and I quote, "The hottest competition in Washington this week is among House Republicans vying for a seat on the Benghazi Kangaroo Court, also known as the Select House Committee to inflate a tragedy into a scandal. Half the House has asked to serve on the committee, which is understandable since it's the perfect opportunity to avoid any real work while waving frantically to right-wing voters stomping their feet in the grandstand." Marsha, the hyperbole, predictable though it may be from the New York Times, I have to believe you cannot accept that kind of rhetoric from a so-called leading newspaper.
Oh, not at all. And it is amazing the lengths that they will go to not find out exactly what happened. And what we do know is that there was a change in their talking points. And first of all, it is just tragic that they have so politicized the war on terror that they chose to have a set of talking points, and then when it did not match their political narrative of that GM was alive and Osama was dead and Al-Qaeda was on the run, what did? They changed them. And then they start making up a story about a video, and they run with that. And I just find it egregious that the Secretary of State would have repeated this known change in talking points to these families that had lost their loved ones and would have been okay with doing that or would have participated in that. So, JD, the goal is to find out exactly what happened, find out what the president was doing, find out why he wasn't in the Situation Room, find out who gave the stand-down order, who gave the stay-put order, who told the troops not to proceed, who decided to not provide the security that Chris Stevens had said he needed at that consulate in advance of September 11th, and to get to all of those communications between him and the Secretary of State and her staff.
Marsha, the reason I'm pursuing this New York Times editorial is because of a trend you and I have seen before in Washington. But there's one other phrase that I think merits your comment. This New York Times editorial this morning also says Republicans want to expose, quote, non-existent malfeasance on the part of the Obama administration. Now, I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Again, it is the New York Times, and apparently they're not interested in the basics of who, what, when, where, why, and how. But the larger point I think needs to be addressed is this, and I'd like your take on it. The New York Times becomes the amen corner for the Obama administration. There is no mistake too egregious, no power play too outrageous, but to pick up the chorus of hosannas from the New York Times. You know and I know the mindset of the Washington media, which has really degenerated into cheerleading for the Obama administration specifically, and by and large for Democrats in general. Will the media, the so-called, some call them the mainstream media, I call them the dominant media culture, will that crowd take the cue from the New York Times and continue to take this investigation and ridicule it along partisan lines?
Well, our concern is that they are going to continue to try to ridicule it. We are hopeful that Speaker Pelosi will appoint Democrats because, you know, there are some Democrat members that would like to serve on this panel, and it's important for them to get to it. JD, let me turn it around this way. What do you think the New York Times would have done that during Watergate, if instead of leading leading the investigation, Senator Howard Baker and Fred Thompson, future senator, who was a staff attorney, if they had tried to cover this up, sweep it under the rug, what do you think would have happened? But instead, see, they led on this. And then it was a Republican who went to the White House and said, Mr. President, it is time for you to leave.
Marsha, it's
and
very
that
interesting.
is the way they handled it.
Yeah, and
That's
again,
the way they
it makes the
handled it.
point. So essentially, you've set up what we could call the Thompson-Baker test from the Watergate Senate hearings in the 1970s for Leader Pelosi and the Democrats. Now's
That's
their
right.
chance to be involved in responsible oversight rather than pulling a political stunt. And it's interesting because you do offer a standard that so many of us remember on the part of Howard Baker and the chief Republican counsel at the time, later another Tennessee senator in Fred Thompson. Let me turn to something else that has gotten so politicized this week, and that is this new climate change report. It claims that climate change is already affecting all of the U.S. You serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Your committee chairman, Fred Upton, has said the report is short on details about how the president plans to respond. He says it's an attempt by the administration to push an agenda against affordable and reliable energy. Do you follow the chairman's lead on that? What's your take on this report?
Well, I agree with the chairman that it is short on some specifics. But the other thing, I go a little bit further. It is short on science because they went from saying global warming, which Lord knows we all could have used a little global warming this winter, to then it was climate change, and now they're going to call it climate disruption. So, let's wait a few more years, and they're going to have another name for this. Because, when you've got cities like Green Bay and Detroit, and they have had their third coldest winters on record, they can't call this thing global warming. And the truth is, we have not cooled, the planet has not cooled since 1998. That was the last year that we had cooling. So what they're trying to do is get to their cap-and-trade agenda. And, John Podesta said that our congressional Republicans had a 0% chance of stopping the administration from exercising their authority under the Clean Air Act. So what they're doing is taking this report, which is lacking in scientific data and analysis, and trying to say, well, see, look, you've got climate change and you've got climate disruption, and this is a present threat, not a future threat. So therefore, we don't have to do cost-benefit analysis or look at any of the economics of the issue. We can just go about doing what we want to do.
And you mentioned John Podesta and almost bragging that, again, this administration, by executive fiat, would move forward on the agenda what we called for so many years cap and trade. In other words, adding costs, adding regulations, and again, curtailing the use of various forms of energy. If that is
Correct.
in fact the case, what do you expect to happen? Will you folks draft legislation countermanding those regulations from the executive? Will you use the power of the purse and rein in spending for the Environmental Protection Agency?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we've already done. As we get into the appropriations process, we're going to have an amendment that will block them from using any funds to implement cap-and-trade type rules. We will also call the EPA in for some oversight hearings. We will move to delay the onset of the new rules. And good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, J.D., will take the Senate come November and then be able to block and prohibit additional portions of this. Right now it's the House having to do all the block and tackle, and we're sure looking forward to having some help.
Well, Marsha, we always look forward to your insights from Capitol Hill as you represent the good people of Tennessee in the House. Thanks so much for weighing in on this, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye now.
Well, we just checked in, JD. There's still no definitive word yet on whether or not the Democrats are going to participate. Nancy Pelosi telling the Associated Press about 11:30 today that the Democrats are still divided on what they should do here, although she did claim that this is a political stunt. We've heard other similar comments from Democrats. Now, the question is, a lot of people are asking right now, who is harmed more by what they do here? Will Democrats shoot themselves in the foot by not participating because they're the ones claiming this is a political stunt, and then they answer that by doing an overtly political move? Or will Democrats or Republicans rather, be hurt more if the Democrats don't sit down, because then the appearance of bipartisanship and a real trying to get to the bottom of this doesn't exist?
In the final analysis, John, they may split the difference. Let me offer some insights into the Democrat caucus. Understand there is a power struggle there. Nancy Pelosi on one side, the avowed leftist from San Francisco, the more moderate man from Maryland, Steny Hoyer, as the whip. These two have butted heads before, and I would imagine what is going on in that conference is you have Elijah Cummings, also of Maryland, saying, hey, look, we need to get somebody there. In the final analysis, don't be surprised if the Dems go with a single member, probably the outgoing longtime Congressman Henry Waxman of California, to be there to heckle and obstruct and expect the press to basically run interference for them.
Well, we'll see what happens, and we'll keep watching this. We'll be back with more here on America's Forum right after this commercial break.